The marketplace stretched out like a metal canyon, full of light and noise and the smell of 1,000 different worlds. Taman walked slowly through the crowds, his eyes moving from one stall to another. Above him, the curved ceiling of the trade station showed the darkness of space and the bright dots of distant stars. Ships came and went through the docking ports, their engines humming through the metal floors. He stopped at a table covered in crystals. They were pretty things, glowing softly in colors he had no names for. The vendor was a creature with too many arms and skin like tree bark. It watched him with interest, probably hoping for a sale. Taman reached out to touch one of the crystals. His hand moved into the light from the overhead lamps, and something on his finger caught the glow. It was just a simple copper ring, worn smooth from years of being touched and turned. The metal had gone dark in places, showing its age. Nothing special to look at, really. Somewhere behind him, someone made a sharp sound, like a gasp, but stranger, deeper. Taman turned around. An old woman was staring at him. At least he thought it was a woman. She had the basic shape of one, though her skin was pale blue and seemed to shimmer slightly. Her face was long and narrow, with 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows. All of them were fixed on his hand, on the ring. She wore clothes that looked expensive, long robes of dark fabric that seemed to move on their own, like water flowing down her body. Behind her stood 3 younger aliens of the same species, all dressed in simpler clothes. Attendants, probably. They looked confused by their elder's reaction. The old woman took a step forward. Then another. Her movements were stiff, like someone who had forgotten how to walk properly. The crowd between them seemed to sense something was happening. People moved aside without being asked. Taman felt his stomach tighten. Had he done something wrong? Broken some rule he didn't know about? Human traders were still fairly new to this part of the galaxy. Maybe the ring meant something bad in her culture. She stopped right in front of him. Up close, he could see how truly ancient she was. Her skin had the texture of old paper, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. When she spoke, her voice shook. "Where did you get that ring?" The words came out in perfect human language, but with an accent he couldn't place. The marketplace had gone quiet around them. Even the vendors had stopped their calling. Everyone was watching. Taman pulled his hand back instinctively, closing his fingers to hide the ring. "It was a gift," he said carefully. "From my family." "Your family." The old woman repeated the words like they were part of a puzzle. "How did your family come to possess it?" "I don't see how that's your business." Taman tried to keep his voice polite but firm. His grandfather had given him this ring on his deathbed. It was the only thing he had left of the old man. He wasn't about to give it up to a stranger, no matter how important she looked. One of the attendants stepped forward. This one was male, younger, with the same pale blue skin. "You stand before Elder Velnara of House Vel," he said sharply. "You will answer her questions with respect." House Vel, even Taman had heard that name. One of the most powerful families in the Althoran collective, the kind of people who made decisions that affected entire planets. His stomach dropped. But the old woman, Velnara, held up one hand. The attendant went silent immediately. "Please," she said, and now her voice was softer, almost begging. "I need to know that ring. I recognize the mark on it. I must know how it came to be on a human hand." Taman looked down at the ring. He turned it slightly, seeing the small symbol pressed into the copper. He'd always thought it was just a decoration, some design his grandfather had liked. "What mark?" he asked. Velnara's eyes, all 6 of them, seemed to shine with moisture. "May I see it, please?" "I will not take it from you. I only wish to look." Something in her voice made Taman relent. Slowly, he held out his hand, palm down so she could see the ring clearly. He kept his hand closed in a loose fist, ready to pull back if she tried to grab it. The old woman leaned close. Her breathing changed, becoming faster. One of her own hands, thin and covered in age spots, reached out but stopped just short of touching his. She stared at the ring like it was the most important thing in the universe. "It is yours," she whispered. "After all these years, I never thought I would see it again." "Yours?" Taman pulled his hand back again. "This ring belonged to my grandfather. He wore it my whole life. It couldn't be yours?" "Not mine to wear," Velnara said. Her voice was strange now, thick with emotion. "Mine to give. I gave this ring to a human man many decades ago, on a station not unlike this one after he saved my life." The marketplace was completely silent now. Taman could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. "My grandfather's name was Donghyun," he said slowly. He was an engineer on a cargo ship. He never talked much about his travels, but he always wore this ring. Velnara made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Her attendants looked shocked. In their culture, Taemin suddenly realized, showing this much emotion in public must be like stripping naked in the street. Dong-hyun, she repeated. I never knew his name.
He never told me.
I searched for years, but human naming systems are complex and I had no records. Only the memory of his face and the knowledge that he saved me and my daughter when no one else would. She swayed slightly. One of her attendants moved quickly to support her elbow. She waved him away impatiently, but she did look unsteady. I will pay you, she said suddenly. Name your price. Any amount. I must know the full story. How did you come to have this ring? What became of the man who wore it, please? I have spent decades with questions and no answers. Taemin looked at the old woman, at the desperation in her alien face, at the way her hands shook slightly. This wasn't about money or status. This was personal, deeply personal. He thought about his grandfather, about the stories the old man used to tell. Not many, but a few. About helping people in trouble. About doing what was right even when it was hard. About how humans had to prove themselves in a galaxy that didn't quite trust them yet. I don't want your money, Taemin said quietly. But if this ring really means that much to you, I'll tell you the story. Not here, though. Somewhere private. Velnara closed all 6 eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there were definitely tears there. Thank you, she said. Thank you, come. I have rooms in the diplomatic quarter. We can speak there without interruption. She turned and began walking, her attendants falling into formation around her. Taemin stood still for a moment, looking down at the ring on his finger. Just a piece of copper, just a simple gift from his grandfather. So why did it feel like his whole world was about to change?
He took a deep breath and followed the old woman through the crowd.
Behind him, the marketplace slowly came back to life. But people were whispering now, spreading the story of what they'd just seen. A human with a ring. An elder who cried. Something was happening, and everyone wanted to know what it meant. Taemin walked faster, catching up to Velnara's group. The ring felt heavy on his finger now. Heavy with history he didn't understand. Not yet. The room was quiet and comfortable. Soft lights came from panels in the walls, giving everything a warm glow. Through the large window, Taemin could see ships moving past the station, their running lights blinking in the darkness. The furniture was strange, designed for bodies that bent differently than human ones, but there was a chair that worked well enough for him. Velnara sat across from him. Her attendants had been dismissed, though Taemin could see them waiting just outside the door through the transparent panel. The old woman had composed herself during the walk here. Her face was calm now, controlled, but her eyes never left the ring on his finger. Tell me, she said simply. Taemin turned the ring on his finger, a habit he'd picked up from his grandfather. My grandfather's name was Dong-hyun, he began. He died 3 years ago. Before that, he worked most of his life as an engineer on deep space vessels. Nothing fancy. Cargo ships mostly, the kind that haul goods between colonies. Velnara nodded slowly, encouraging him to continue. He gave me this ring the day before he died, Taemin said. His throat felt tight. The memory was still fresh. He was in the hospital and he knew he wasn't getting better. He took it off his finger and put it in my hand. He said it was the most important thing he owned. Did he tell you where it came from? Velnara asked softly. Yes. Taemin looked down at the ring. He told me a story. About a rescue mission that wasn't supposed to happen. The old woman leaned forward slightly. Please, tell me everything. Taemin took a deep breath and tried to remember his grandfather's exact words. It was about 40 years ago. Maybe a bit more. Grandfather was working on a cargo ship called the Morning Star. They were heading back to Earth with a load of mining equipment when they picked up a distress signal. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice telling the story. The old man had been weak, his voice thin, but his eyes had been bright with memory. The signal was coming from a ship that was drifting, dead in space. No power, no engines, nothing. The captain wanted to ignore it. They were already behind schedule, and they didn't have much in the way of emergency supplies. But grandfather convinced him to at least check it out. Velnara made a small sound, not quite a word, just a noise of acknowledgement. When they got close, they found a vessel with a hole in the side. Something had torn through the hull. A weapons hit, grandfather thought, though he wasn't sure. Most of the crew was dead. The life support was failing. The ship was full of bodies. Taman paused. His grandfather had looked sad when he told this part. Sad and angry. There were only a few survivors left. They were in one sealed compartment that still had air. Grandfather said they were aliens he'd never seen before. Tall, with blue skin and multiple eyes. He and 2 other crew members put on suits and went across to get them. How many survivors? Velnara asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. 4. 2 adults and 2 children. One of the adults died during the transfer. His suit failed. That left 3. A woman and 2 young ones. The woman was hurt badly. She'd been hit by shrapnel when whatever attacked them had breached the hull. Velnara closed all 6 eyes. My daughter was 5 years old, she said quietly. My son was 3, but he died a year later from an illness. The human doctors tried to save him, but they didn't know enough about our biology. Taman felt his chest tighten. He hadn't known that part. I'm sorry. She opened her eyes again. Continue, please. Grandfather said getting them to the nearest station took a week. The Morning Star wasn't designed to carry alien passengers. They had to jury-rig the life support systems to provide the right air mixture. Grandfather worked 20-hour days trying to keep the systems running. The captain gave up his own quarters for the woman and children. The crew shared their food even though it meant everyone went hungry. He remembered how his grandfather had smiled at that part. A sad smile, but proud too. The woman's injuries were bad. Grandfather said she had something like broken ribs, but worse. Internal damage. She was in pain the whole trip, but she never complained. Just held her children and sang to them in a language nobody understood. Velnara nodded. I sang them the old songs. The ones my mother sang to me. I thought I would die and I wanted them to remember. You didn't die, Taman said. No, because your grandfather kept me alive. He and his crew. They shared their food, their water, their air. They could have left us. Many would have. The cost of rescuing us almost bankrupted their ship. They had to sell their cargo at a loss to pay for the supplies they used. Taman hadn't known that detail either. His grandfather had never mentioned it. When we reached the station, Velnara continued, speaking slowly as if pulling memories from deep storage, I tried to pay them. But I had nothing. My ship had been carrying my family's wealth, and it was all destroyed. I had only the clothes I wore and my children. I was grateful, but I felt ashamed. They had sacrificed so much, and I could give them nothing in return. You gave grandfather the ring, Taman said. Yes. Velnara looked at it again. It was a family heirloom, not valuable in terms of credits. Just copper, as you can see, but it bore my house mark. In my culture, giving such a ring creates a debt, a bond. It means that my family owes your family a debt that can never be fully repaid. It is a promise that extends through generations. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small device. She touched it and a hologram appeared in the air between them. It showed a symbol, the same symbol that was pressed into the ring. The mark of House Vel, she said. Your grandfather probably never knew what it meant. But I hoped that someday I would find him and properly thank him. I searched for years. I had no name, no records. Human ships of that era kept poor databases. I couldn't find him. Taman looked at the hologram, then at the ring. They matched perfectly. Grandfather told me something else, he said quietly. He said that the ring reminded him of why he became an engineer in the first place. Not to make money or see the galaxy, but to help people. He said that humans had to prove they belonged among the stars. Not through weapons or wealth, but through compassion. He said that's what made us human. Velnara stood up slowly. She walked to the window and looked out at the ships passing by. For a long time, she said nothing. Your grandfather saved more than my life that day, she finally said. He saved my children. My daughter survived and grew strong. She married and had children of her own. My grandchildren exist because of what he did. My great-grandchildren. All of them owe their lives to a human who stopped to help when no one else would. She turned back to face him. But there is more to this story. Things you don't know. Things your grandfather couldn't have known. That ring and what it represents changed more than just my family. It changed the fate of humanity itself. Taman felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Velnara walked back to her chair and sat down carefully. She suddenly looked very tired, very old. I need to tell you the rest of the story, she said. The part your grandfather never knew. About who I am, what I've done, and why that ring on your finger is one of the most important objects in the galaxy right now. She gestured to his chair. Please sit comfortably. This will take some time. Taemin sat back down, his mind racing with questions. The ring felt different now, heavier, like it carried the weight of decades of history he didn't understand. "I'm listening," he said, and Velnara began to speak. Velnara spoke slowly at first, choosing her words with care. Taemin listened without interrupting, though his mind filled with questions at every sentence. "I need you to understand something about the time when your grandfather found me," she began. "The galaxy was different then. Humanity had only just begun to explore beyond your local systems. You had primitive faster-than-light drives, basic weapons, simple technology. To the older races, including my people, humans were nothing special, just another young species taking its first steps into the dark." She paused, her 6 eyes distant with memory. Most of the elder races viewed humanity with suspicion. Or worse, with contempt. Your species was aggressive, territorial. You fought wars among yourselves even as you reached for the stars. The Althoran Collective debated whether to allow human expansion at all. Some suggested containment. Keep humans in their small corner of space and wait to see if they would destroy themselves. Taemin felt a flash of anger but kept his mouth shut. He needed to hear this. "I was part of that debate," Velnara continued. "I held a seat on the Lesser Council. Not the highest authority, but influential enough, and I voted for containment. I believed humans were too dangerous to be trusted. Too violent. Too unpredictable." She looked directly at Taemin. "I was wrong. And the universe made sure I understood exactly how wrong I was." "The attack on your ship," Taemin said quietly. "Yes, pirates, we think. Or perhaps raiders from one of the fringe territories. We never found out for certain. My husband was leading a diplomatic mission to a neutral station. We were traveling with minimal escort because we were in supposedly safe space, civilized space, protected by treaties and agreements." Her voice turned bitter on that last word. "They hit us without warning. Disabled our engines first, then breached the hull. They killed most of the crew in the first few minutes. My husband died trying to seal the breach. We were left drifting, sending out distress signals on every frequency we had." Velnara stood again, too agitated to sit still. She paced slowly across the room. 7 ships passed within range of our signal. 7 different species. All of them were from races we considered civilized, advanced, wise. Ships from the Collective, from the Merchant Union, from the Harmony Pact. All of them received our distress call. We know this because we monitored the responses." She stopped pacing and turned to face Taemin. "Do you know what they did? They ran cost-benefit analyses. They calculated the resources required for a rescue against the potential gain. Some ignored us entirely. Others actually sent messages explaining why they couldn't help. Too far off course, not enough medical supplies, insurance regulations, policies about interfering in potential military conflicts." Her voice shook with old anger. "We floated there for 3 days. 3 days watching our air run out, watching our people die. My daughter asked me why no one was coming to help us. She was 5 years old. What was I supposed to tell her? That we weren't worth the cost of rescue?" Taemin felt sick. "But my grandfather came. Yes, on the 4th day the Morning Star arrived. A human cargo ship. Not even a proper rescue vessel. Just a commercial hauler with a crew of 12. They weren't equipped for rescue operations. They didn't have the supplies. They were already behind schedule and losing money." She walked back to the window, looking out at the stars. "Your grandfather and his crew saved us anyway. They didn't run calculations. They didn't check their insurance policy. They didn't debate whether we were worth the cost. They just came and got us. They jury-rigged their systems. They shared their food even though it meant going hungry. They gave up their comfort so we could survive." Velnara turned back to Taemin, and this time tears were flowing freely down her face. In her culture, he realized this was like screaming in public. A complete loss of control that would normally bring deep shame. "Those 7 civilized ships had more resources than the Morning Star," she said. "Better medical equipment. More supplies. Faster engines. But they chose to do nothing. And the primitive humans, with their cramped little ship and their simple technology, chose to risk everything to save strangers." She sat down heavily. It broke something in my mind. Everything I believed about advancement and wisdom and civilization. It all shattered. I realized that the older races hadn't become wiser as they aged. They'd just become better at justifying cruelty as pragmatism. Taemin didn't know what to say. He just turned the ring on his finger and waited for her to continue. After we recovered, I tried to return to the council. I spoke about what happened, about the humans who saved us when no one else would. I argued that humanity deserved full membership in the collective, that they had demonstrated something more important than technological advancement. They had shown moral courage. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I was mocked. Some council members claimed I was suffering from trauma. Others suggested that my gratitude had clouded my judgment. They said one act of kindness didn't represent the entire human species. They pointed to human wars, to corporate exploitation, to territorial disputes. They said humans were still too barbaric. But you didn't stop, Taman said. No, I couldn't, because I knew the truth. The barbaric humans had saved me when the civilized races left me to die. I spent years fighting for human rights in the collective. It cost me politically. I was pushed out of positions, lost influence. Other members of my own house called me the human lover. It was meant as an insult. She smiled, though sadness filled her eyes. My daughter helped me. She was young, but she remembered the human ship, remembered your grandfather singing human songs to her while he worked on the life support systems. She couldn't forget the kindness. When she grew older, she joined my cause. She even married a human diplomat. His name was Hyunwoo, a good man. He died 10 years ago. I'm sorry, Taman said. Don't be. They had 30 happy years together. And they had children. My grandchildren are half human. They serve throughout the collective now in various positions, all of them working to build bridges between species. Velnara leaned forward, her voice intense. But it took decades, Taman. Decades of fighting. Slowly, very slowly, opinions began to change. The story of my rescue spread. Not everyone believed it, but enough did. Enough to matter. Progressive factions formed. They pushed for human integration. Eventually, we won. Humans gained full membership in the collective. Access to protected trade routes. Seats on the Interspecies Council. That's good, Taman said. That's what grandfather would have wanted. Yes, Velnara agreed. But now that progress is in danger. She activated her holographic device again. This time it showed charts and graphs, political data, Taman guessed, though he couldn't read the alien script. In recent years, conservative factions have grown stronger. They claim the old rescue story is just propaganda, a myth created to justify human expansion. Without proof, without your grandfather to testify, the story loses its power. Some extremists even call for humanity's expulsion from the collective. Taman felt his stomach drop. Expulsion? New trade restrictions are being proposed. Old prejudices are returning. The conservatives argue that humans have become too influential too quickly. That you're a threat to the established order. She looked at him seriously, and without proof of the rescue, without evidence that humans deserve the trust we've placed in them, the political tide is turning. She gestured at the ring on his finger. But now I have proof. That ring bears my house mark, encoded with genetic signatures that cannot be forged. Station records from 40 years ago can be cross-referenced. We can prove the story is true. We can prove that humans chose compassion when other races chose indifference. Taman looked down at the simple copper band, just a family heirloom, just a gift from his grandfather. But now it carried the weight of political futures and interspecies relations. What do you need me to do? He asked quietly. Velnara met his eyes. Testify before the Interspecies Council. Tell them your grandfather's story. Show them the ring. Help me prove that the rescue really happened. Help me show them that humanity earned its place among the stars. She paused. But I must warn you, this will make you a public figure, a symbol. There will be those who hate what you represent. You could become a target. Taman thought about his grandfather, about the old man who had risked everything to save strangers, about the values he had tried to pass on, about what it meant to be human. He touched the ring one more time, feeling its familiar weight. When do we leave? He asked. The journey to the council headquarters took 3 days. Velnara used the time to show Taman exactly how far the ripples of his grandfather's kindness had spread. They sat in her private quarters aboard her family ship. It was far more luxurious than anything Taman had ever experienced. The walls displayed real-time feeds from different parts of the galaxy. Velnara touched her holographic controls and images began to appear in the air between them. This is my daughter, she said. The hologram showed a woman who looked like Velnara but younger, healthier, Standing beside her was a human man with kind eyes and a warm smile. Between them stood two children who looked like perfect blends of both species. "Her name is Hana," Velnara said softly. "She chose a human name after she married Hyunwoo. She said it helped her feel connected to both her peoples. These are my grandchildren. They're adults now, of course. This image is 20 years old." She changed the display. Now it showed official-looking documents with seals and signatures. Hana became an ambassador. She worked for 30 years building relationships between human colonies and Althoran territories. She negotiated trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, scientific partnerships. Much of the peace we have today exists because of her work. Another image appeared. This one showed a younger man speaking before what looked like a government assembly. "My grandson, Daewon. He serves on the Interspecies Council as a human Althoran representative. He spent his career fighting for the rights of hybrid children. There are thousands of them now. Humans and Althoran who fell in love and started families. Without his advocacy, those children would have no legal status in either society." More images flowed past. A woman working in a laboratory, a man commanding a joint species military vessel, a teenager teaching human language to young Althoran students. "All of them exist because your grandfather saved me and my daughter," Velnara said. "Every descendant, every life they've touched, every person they've helped. It all traces back to that one moment when the Morning Star stopped to answer a distress call." Taemin felt overwhelmed. He'd never thought of his grandfather as anyone special, just a kind old man who had lived a quiet life and told a few good stories. "But it goes beyond my family," Velnara continued. She changed the display again. Now it showed what looked like historical records. Images of protests and rallies. Aliens of different species holding signs written in various languages. Many of the signs showed a symbol that looked like a simplified version of a human ship. "The story of my rescue became famous among certain groups," Velnara explained. "Progressive movements across multiple species adopted it as proof that newcomer civilizations shouldn't be judged solely on their technology or military power. That moral character matters more than age or advancement." She showed him footage of speeches, different aliens, different worlds, all talking about the same thing. The human ship that stopped when others didn't. The crew that shared their food. The engineer who worked himself to exhaustion to keep strangers alive. Universities started teaching it, Velnara said. Ethics courses used it as a case study. The question wasn't just about whether to help someone in distress. It was about what we lose when we reduce everything to cost-benefit analysis, when we let pragmatism become an excuse for cruelty. She pulled up graphs and charts showing political shifts over the decades. Taemin couldn't read all the alien text, but he could see the trends. Slow changes at first, then building momentum. Legislation started to pass. New rules about responding to distress signals. Requirements that ships carry extra supplies for potential rescues. Penalties for ignoring calls for help. It didn't happen overnight. It took years. But slowly the galaxy changed. Velnara's expression grew darker. But change creates resistance. For every person inspired by the story, another felt threatened by it. Conservative groups began to push back. They said the older races were losing their identity, that humans were becoming too influential too quickly. The displays changed to show different footage now. Angry crowds. Burning effigies. Propaganda posters showing humans as invaders or manipulators. They couldn't attack the story directly, Velnara explained. It was too well known. Too many people believed it. So instead they began claiming it was exaggerated, or that it was a lie told to make humans look better than they were. They said I had invented it to justify my political positions. She looked tired suddenly, ancient and worn down. Without your grandfather to testify, without physical proof, the story became just another debate. Something people could believe or disbelieve based on their existing prejudices. The conservatives grew bolder. They started proposing legislation to restrict human movement, to limit human influence on the council, to reduce humanity's role in the collective. Taemin watched footage of what looked like political debates. Aliens arguing with each other in grand chambers. Even without understanding the language, he could sense the anger and frustration. It got worse, Velnara said quietly. Attacks started. Not military attacks, but economic ones. Human businesses were denied licenses. Human students were rejected from universities. Human ships were subjected to extra inspections, extra delays. Small things individually. But together they created a pattern. She showed him statistics. Trade numbers declining. Human representation in various institutions dropping, applications being denied at increasing rates. Some humans began to wonder if joining the collective had been a mistake, Velnara said. If they were better off alone. Isolationist movements grew stronger on human worlds. The relationship that took decades to build was crumbling. She turned off the displays and looked at Taemin directly. And then I found you, standing in a marketplace wearing my house ring. Proof that the story was real. Proof that your grandfather existed. That he did what we said he did. Proof that can be verified by genetic markers and station records. Taemin touched the ring. It felt like it was burning his skin, though he knew that was just his imagination. The council convenes in 2 days, Velnara said. There will be a major vote on new restrictions to human activities in collective space. The conservative faction has the numbers to pass it. Unless something changes their minds. And you think my testimony will change their minds? Taemin asked. I think it might. The story of your grandfather has symbolic power. But symbols only work if people believe in them. If we can prove the story is true, if we can show them the ring and the records, if they can see that humans really did choose compassion when other races chose calculation, then maybe, just maybe, we can remind them why humans deserve to be here. She leaned forward. But I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. If you testify, your life will change forever. You'll become a public figure, a symbol of human Althoran friendship. There will be people who love you for it and people who hate you for it. You won't be able to just fade back into anonymity. Taemin thought about his grandfather again, about the stories the old man had told. Not just about the rescue, but about all the small choices that made up a life. Choosing to help even when it was inconvenient. Choosing kindness even when it cost something. Choosing to believe that people, whatever their species, deserve dignity and respect. My grandfather never became famous, Taemin said slowly. He lived a quiet life, worked his job, raised his family. But he always said that the small choices mattered. That how you treat people when no one important is watching says more about you than grand gestures ever could. He looked at Velnara. He made a choice to help you. Not because he wanted recognition or reward, just because it was the right thing to do. If I don't testify now, if I hide because it might be uncomfortable or dangerous, then I'm disrespecting his memory. I'm saying that his choice didn't matter. Velnara smiled. It was the first genuine smile Taemin had seen from her. He would be proud of you, she said softly. I hope so, Taemin replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars move past the viewports. Tomorrow they would reach the council headquarters. Tomorrow the real test would begin. But for now, Taemin just sat and thought about his grandfather, and about how one man's kindness had touched so many lives across so many years. The ring caught the light from the viewports, gleaming softly. Just copper. Just a simple gift, but carrying the weight of hope for an entire species. The Grand Council chamber was the largest room Taemin had ever seen. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into shadow. Curved rows of seats rose in tiers on all sides, creating a massive amphitheater. Each seat held a representative from a different species or faction. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all watching as Taemin walked to the center of the floor. His footsteps echoed. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the otherwise silent chamber. He could feel all those eyes on him, some curious, some hostile, some simply waiting to see what would happen. Velnara walked beside him, her back straight despite her age. She wore formal robes today, deep blue with silver threading that caught the light. She looked every inch the elder of House Vel. Important, powerful, someone who belonged in this place. Taemin wore the only good clothes he owned, a simple suit from Earth. It felt inadequate here, surrounded by aliens in elaborate ceremonial dress, but it was all he had. He touched the ring on his finger for comfort, a gesture that had become automatic over the past few days. They reached the center of the chamber. A platform rose from the floor, lifting them up so everyone could see. Taemin's stomach turned over. Heights had never been his favorite thing. A voice boomed out, speaking in a language Taemin didn't understand. His translator implant kicked in a moment later, converting the words. The council recognizes Elder Velnara of House Vel and her human companion. They have requested to speak before the vote on Resolution 8847 concerning human activity restrictions. The floor is yours, Elder. Velnara stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber without need for amplification. Some kind of acoustic design, Taemin guessed. Honored council members, I come before you today with evidence. Evidence of a debt owed. Evidence of a truth that has been challenged. Evidence that humanity earned its place among the stars through compassion, not conquest. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. Velnara continued. 40 years ago, I was left to die. My ship was attacked. My husband was killed. My children and I floated in the darkness, sending distress signals that went ignored. 7 ships passed within range. 7 civilized advanced species. None of them stopped. Her voice grew harder. But one ship did stop. A human cargo vessel. The Morning Star. It wasn't equipped for rescue. It didn't have adequate supplies. The crew had every reason to continue on their way. But they didn't. They saved us. And in doing so, they shattered every assumption I held about what it means to be civilized. She gestured to Taemin. This young man is the grandson of the engineer who kept me alive during that rescue. His name is Taemin, and he carries proof of the story I have told for decades. Taemin stepped forward, his heart pounding. Someone handed him a microphone. He nearly dropped it. I'm nobody special, he began. His voice shook. He cleared his throat and tried again. I'm just a trader. I haul goods between stations. But my grandfather, his name was Dong Hyun, he was the engineer on the Morning Star. He held up his hand, showing the ring. Before he died, he gave me this ring. He told me about the rescue, about finding a ship full of dead aliens and a few survivors, about working himself nearly to death to keep them alive, about sharing food when his crew was already hungry. He said it was the most important thing he'd ever done. A voice called out from the tiers. Taemin's translator identified it as coming from an Althoran conservative faction member. A ring proves nothing. It could be fake. This could all be an elaborate deception. Velnara's voice cut through the chamber like a knife. The ring bears my house mark, encoded with genetic signatures, markers that cannot be forged. We have submitted it for analysis. The results are already in your data feeds. Check them. A long silence followed. Taemin could almost feel the assembled representatives accessing their information systems, reviewing the analysis. He stood there, feeling exposed and small. Another voice spoke up. This one was human but hostile. Even if the ring is real, even if this rescue happened, what does it prove? One act of kindness doesn't represent all of humanity. We're flawed. We have wars. We have corporate greed. We have people who would have ignored that distress call just like the other ships did. Taemin felt his fear start to transform into something else. Anger, maybe, or just frustration at the unfairness of it all. You're right, he said. The words came out louder than he intended. Humans aren't perfect. We have wars. We have greed. We make mistakes. We're young and we're still learning. He looked around at the assembled representatives. So many species. So many different faces. But that's not what this is about. This isn't about saying humans are better than everyone else. It's about saying we're trying. My grandfather didn't save those people because humans are naturally compassionate. He saved them because he chose to. It cost him. It cost his whole crew. They went hungry. They went broke. They risked their lives. But they did it anyway. He held up the ring again. Every species here has the capacity for good and evil. Every civilization has bright moments and dark ones. The question isn't whether humans are perfect. The question is whether we're willing to choose compassion even when it's hard, even when it costs us something. Another voice, this one from a species Taemin didn't recognize. But why should one old story change our policies? Times have changed. Humans have grown powerful. Too powerful, some would say. Velnara spoke again. Because stories matter. Values matter. The question before you today is simple. Do you want a collective built on calculating the cost-benefit of every decision? Do you want a galaxy where helping others is seen as foolish? Where distress calls go unanswered because rescue isn't profitable? She paused, letting the question hang in the air. Or do you want a collective that remembers why civilizations exist in the first place? Not just to accumulate wealth or power, but to protect each other, to help each other, to choose kindness even when it's difficult. She walked to stand beside Taemin. This young man's grandfather made that choice. And because he did, my daughter lived. My grandchildren exist. Thousands of people across multiple species owe their lives and livelihoods to that single decision to stop and help. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as she could. Vote to restrict humanity if you wish. Vote to say that kindness was weakness. Vote to say that the old ways, where 7 ships ignored a dying crew, were better. But know what you're voting for. Know what kind of galaxy you're choosing to create. The chamber erupted into discussion. Voices called out in dozens of languages. Arguments started. Taman could see representatives turning to each other, debating, gesturing. The translator implant couldn't keep up with all of it. Just fragments of conversation. The evidence seems legitimate, but policy can't be based on sentiment. She has a point about our values. Humans are still too aggressive. One story doesn't excuse everything. A loud tone sounded, cutting through the noise. The voice from before spoke again. The Council will now vote on Resolution 8847. All in favor of imposing new restrictions on human activities in collective space. Taemin watched as lights began to appear on a massive display board. Each light represented a vote. Red for yes, blue for no. They appeared slowly at first, then faster. His hands were shaking. He watched the lights multiply, spreading across the board like stars, red and blue mixing together. It was impossible to tell which side was winning. The voting seemed to take forever. Taemin's legs felt weak. He wanted to sit down, but there was nowhere to sit. He just stood there, watching the lights appear and counting in his head. Finally, the last few lights appeared. The board froze. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the voice announced the results. The resolution fails. 3,200 votes in favor, 3,600 against. Resolution 8847 is rejected. The chamber exploded with noise. Some representatives cheered. Others shouted in anger. Arguments broke out across the tiers. Taemin just stood there, feeling dizzy. Velnara touched his arm gently. "Come," she said. "Let's get you out of here." They descended from the platform. As they walked across the chamber floor, people called out to them. Some wanted to congratulate them. Others shouted insults. Velnara's attendants formed a protective barrier, guiding them toward an exit. Outside in a quiet corridor, Taemin finally let himself breathe. He leaned against a wall, his legs shaking. "Did we really just change galactic policy?" he asked. Velnara smiled. "You told the truth. The Council did the rest." 6 months later, Taemin stood on Earth, in a park in Seoul where his grandfather had been born. A memorial had been erected. Simple stone with a bronze plaque. It showed the Morning Star and listed the names of its crew. Velnara stood beside him. Behind them were dozens of people. Humans and Althoran, some of Velnara's grandchildren, some representatives from the Council. News cameras recording everything. Taemin held the ring in his hand. He'd taken it off for the first time since his grandfather's death. "This belongs to you," he said to Velnara. "The debt is paid. You've honored my grandfather's memory. You can take it back now." Velnara looked at the ring for a long moment. Then she gently closed Taemin's fingers around it. "No," she said softly. The ring was a promise that compassion would be remembered. That kindness would matter. You kept that promise. Now you must pass it on. She looked at the crowd gathered around them. "Tell your children this story. Tell your grandchildren, not as a story of humans being better than everyone else, but as a reminder that every person, every day has the choice to help or to walk away, to calculate cost or to simply care. Your grandfather's choice rippled across decades and changed the galaxy. Imagine what could happen if more people made that same choice." Taemin slipped the ring back on his finger. It caught the sunlight gleaming softly. Just copper, just a simple gift, but carrying the weight of hope, the weight of legacy, the weight of a promise that kindness matters even when it costs us everything. In the sky above, a ship passed overhead. Its running lights blinked once, twice. A signal, a greeting, a reminder that the galaxy was full of people just trying to find their way home. And somewhere out there, another distress call would sound. Another ship would face the choice to stop or to continue on. Another person would decide what kind of galaxy they wanted to live in. The ring caught the light, and in its reflection, the future shone brighter.